Hello everyone. The story I'm going to share today is Forfeiting the Chance to Become Immortal. Li Linfu was prime minister during the Tang Dynasty. As a child, he lived in eastern capital Louyang and loved to play all day long. Because he was always occupied with playing, he didn't learn how to read until he was 20 years old. Li's hobbies include hunting, playing polo, and racing eagles and ducks. His favorite sport was playing polo on a donkey. When he's tired, he would dismount the donkey and lie on the ground to rest. One day, an ugly Taoist sat facing the ground and said to Li Linfu, "How is playing polo on a donkey fun? Is it worthwhile interest?" Li glared at the Taoist and retorted, "Mind your own business." The Taoist then left. The next day, the Taoist came again and repeated the same words. Li, being a bright young man, realized that Taoist wasn't an ordinary person. He quickly stood up and bowed to the Taoist. "Although you are good at the polo, sooner or later you will fall off the donkey. It will be too late for regret when you are hurt," warned the Taoist. Li promised that he would be careful in the future, no longer play polo on a donkey. The Taoist smiled and told him, "I'll be waiting for you here in 3 days at 3 a.m. Li agreed to the appointment. By the time Li got there on the agreed date, the Taoist was already waiting. The Taoist asked, "Why are you late?" Li quickly apologized, and then the Taoist asked to meet again in another 3 days at 3 a.m. For the second appointment, Li got there by midnight and waited for a long time for the Taoist to arrive. The Taoist was happy to talk to Li. He said, "I've been in the human world for 500 years already. You're the only one the heavenly fairies have on the name list. So someday you can fly to heaven and become immortal. But if you don't want to become immortal, you can serve as prime minister for Tang Dynasty for 20 years. Think about it. I'm going back today. I will meet you here again at 3 a.m. in 3 days." Back home, Li thought, "I was born into a royal family. I have been bold and chivalrous since my youth. It would be wonderful to serve as prime minister for 20 years." When Li Linfu met the Taoist again, he confessed that he wanted to be prime minister, not immortal. The Taoist pitied him and scolded, "I really didn't think you were so vulgar. I have visited 500 talented people. You are the only one with the ability to become immortal. You've really disappointed me. I pity you." Li felt immense regret upon hearing this. He wanted to change his mind, but the Taoist told him that it was too late. The gods in heaven already knew his first choice. Before leaving, the Taoist warned him, "You can be prime minister for 20 years, in which you will have total power over other people's life. You cannot harm people through conspiracies. Try to save more people and kill as few as possible in order to accumulate virtue for your next life. By doing so, you will be able to fly to heaven and become immortal in another 300 years. Now, your good fortune is imminent. You may go to the capital and take an official post." A tearful Li Linfu said goodbye as the Taoist left. Li Linfu's lineage goes back to Li Yuan, the first emperor of Tang Dynasty. He was the great-grandson of Li Yuan's cousin, Li Linfu. Li Linfu's uncle also worked as an official in Tang court. When Li went to visit his uncle in the capital, the uncle was surprised and asked why he was there. Li Linfu told him, "I was wrong before, when I only wanted to play and didn't like to read. I have come to you and I'm determined to change. If I make a mistake again, I'm willing to be whipped by you." Li's uncle found this odd, but they didn't ask anything. He didn't ask him to read, but asked him to organize tableware after each banquet. Li always washed the tableware thoroughly and put everything in order and in the right place. Li's uncle sometimes asked him to work outside during the bad winter weather. Li never refused, and despite having to trudge through deep snow, he completed his assignments well. The uncle grew more and more fond of him, and often praised his nephew among other officials. With his uncle's help, Li Linfu received a position as an advisor in the imperial court. After 10 years, he was appointed prime minister. Li was skilled at using his authority and also had a good understanding of what the emperor wanted, so he eventually won the emperor's favor. He later held total power during the period of Tang Dynasty, and nearly every minister and citizen feared him. As the saying goes, just as a blind cry is being heard, all things may be subdued by something with more power. Louyang, the army commander of 3 provinces, didn't fear Emperor Xuanzong, yet he trembled with fear whenever he saw Li Linfu. He asked one of the Taoists he knew, "I'm not afraid when I see the emperor. So how come I panic whenever I see Li Linfu? You have 500 devils with carpet heads and iron foreheads, who act as the celestial guards protecting you." The Taoist replied, "How can you be afraid of Li? Invite him to visit so I can see what happens when you are two together." Thus, Louyang held a banquet at his home and invited Li as a guest. The Taoists hid behind the curtain to watch them. After Li left, the Taoist told Louyang, "Strange, when Li came, a boy in blue walked in front of him with censer. The 500 devils following you were frightened and escaped upon seeing the boy. I'm not sure why. Perhaps Li was an immortal, temporarily demoted to our human world." Several years later, Li Linfu began to expel dissidents in order to strengthen his power and position. Many people were sent to prison and many innocent people were killed. He had completely forgotten what the Taoist advised at this point. Whoever wanted to meet Li has to dismount his horse far away and walk to his mansion. At noon one day, a person unrestrictedly knocked on Li's door. Surprised, the guard opened the door and saw a Taoist, saying he wanted to see Prime Minister. The guard loudly berated him, tried to drive him away, and flogged him. After, the Taoist got up and walked away with a smile. The next day, the Taoist went to Li's residence again. This time, the guard reported the situation to Li. Li claimed he didn't remember ever knowing a Taoist, but nevertheless asked the Taoist to come in. When Li Linfu saw the Taoist, he suddenly remembered the advice from 20 years ago. He was overcome with fear and shame, and suddenly felt at loss. It dawned on him that the Taoist told him he would be a prime minister for 20 years, and it has been exactly 20 years now. Yet he never followed the Taoist's advice. Li was so scared and felt ill. Li bowed to the Taoist, who in return asked, "How have you been? You didn't heed my advice. Instead of doing things with compassion, you killed many innocent people. All your crimes have been recorded in heaven. Are you really not afraid of being punished by heaven?" At loss for words, Li just kept kowtowing. The Taoist bade farewell to him. Li tried to give him an abundance of gold and silver, but he refused. He waved his hand and said, "Do your best, and I'll meet you in 600 years." Then he disappeared. In the 11th year of Tianbao, the last period of Emperor Xuanzong's reign, Li Linfu died. He was said to have been involved in a rebellion, so all his family property was confiscated and his children were exiled. Because of his single thought of being greedy for power, Li Linfu lost his chance at divine fate. Thank you very much for listening to the story. More touching stories will be ready for you if you just subscribe it. Thank you again.